All right, so today we have Chloé Messdaghi, founder and CTO of Sustained Cyber. So, welcome to the podcast, Chloe.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
All right, so the topic today is security, AI, and policy and regulation. So, let's start with security. I guess at a high level, Chloe, obviously, listeners are probably working in companies where there's a healthy cybersecurity budget. But how does AI security differ from traditional cybersecurity?
Yeah, so I would just say that in itself, AI is a black box. We don't really have too much transparency or explainability. And to give you a really good idea of how that situation is that transparency shows AI how it works, and then explainability shows why it makes decisions. The thing is that we aren't doing well enough in that area. And so when you have technologies that are like a black box, it's very hard to secure. So, for example, a good way of looking at, foundational model transparency is there is a foundation model transparency index, which rates, foundation models from a 0 to 100, 0 being like there's absolutely no transparency whatsoever, to 100 being completely transparent. And in 2023, these results came out with Meta Llama 2, which had the highest score out of all, but it scored a 54. Now, remember that score index is from a 0 to 100. And then when it comes to like OpenAI, ChatGPT 4, the total score that it received was 48. Now, Meta Llama is an open development versus OpenAI ChatGPT is a closed development. So if you're thinking of like, well, our foundational models, that are open, safer, they're slightly more transparent. But the thing is, it's very hard to secure something like that. And right now, there's a huge knowledge gap and how to go about that. But also, companies aren't doing what is needed at this time when it comes to cybersecurity measures either.
So, Chloe, when you talk to executives and teams at these companies, do you make a distinction between traditional AI and traditional machine learning and the new AI that relies on these foundation models, the so-called generative AI?
I would say that in general, when we have conversations about securing AI, it also is including, your models as well. But it's also just kind of knowing what am I supposed to do? What are the regulations I need to be aware of, or what frameworks are there for me to use? And those are most of the questions are what am I supposed to do here? I'm concerned and I need to figure out how to go about it. Because for some time now, we've had AI for a while. But for some time now, security has not been part of that conversation. Security hasn't been in place to help making sure that models are secure. Also, security folks, where do they turn to learn how do I go about securing, AI? Because there isn't really any certifications at this time that really does dive into that. So if you think about it, we're kind of in a really tricky situation where we're playing a massive catch up game, but we've also haven't been in the room to be aware of all the different things we need to be aware of for a good number of years.
So, in traditional cybersecurity, people usually, I would suspect at this point, have incident response playbook. So, what's the state of awareness among AI teams of having an incident response strategy? Because my impression, Chloe, is they don't even define what an incident is.
You are very much yes, I would say yes. So I think we've always had an issue, even with traditional cybersecurity, on making sure our incident response plans are not ad hoc or haven't expired. What I mean is that I think there was a study by the Parliament Institute a couple of years ago, which said about, I think it was 74, but I could be wrong. So let's just say anywhere between like 72 to 74% of organizations uh, that they would usually do an ad hoc when it came to an incident, or it would be that the thing was so out of date, that they couldn't utilize it. So I think we've always had this problem, And a lot of that has to do with not being aware of all the different technologies or software or products that the company is using at the time. So it's very hard to try to defend yourself or to protect if you don't know everything in your environment.
So actually, to inject a sense of urgency among our listeners on this thing, at Chloe's previous company, they have this report, which is the AI threat landscape, which was released in November 2024. I think they found 77% of the companies they talked to reported breaches in their AI systems.
Yeah, so I think a really interesting statistic that came out last year by the Global State of Responsible AI Act was about the adoption of AI related cybersecurity measures by region. So they measured over 1,000 organizations participated and they checked for five security measures. And for North America, 70% of them said that they do about one or two of those security measures. Once again, those are five total security measures. And that 24% roughly adopt anywhere from like two and a half or like kind of two, maybe three to up to four measures. And the average number of measurements that were adopted that they found out was like 2.38 to be exact with you. So yeah, we're kind of in a situation here.
So let's say I'm a technical leader at a company, and listening to this podcast, I come to realize, hey, I have to update my incident response playbook for AI. So what are some of the first things I should be thinking or doing?
Make sure you have all the right people in the room. I think one of the things that we still have issues with is department silos and lack of communication across. So that means your system needs to be heard. I think one of the things that I've always seen this trend since being in the space is that SSOs can be dismissed or not even in the room when it comes to decisions. And that has a lot to do with concern that it may restrict innovation, it may restrict the product launch dates and that, that's not good for business usually. And so I think that's one of the things is ensuring that you have your CTOs in the room, you have your chief data scientists in the room, you have your ML developers in the room, you have all the right people that are there to ensure that there's safety and everyone's taking the precautions that they need, but also learning that there are resources out there to help you along your way.
So for the companies that are have a mature cybersecurity incident playbook that they now want to update for AI, I'm assuming they got to a place where their traditional security playbook is good because they did collect all the key people in the room. So I guess from what you're saying, what AI brings is you have to include even more people.
Yeah. You have to really ensure that those silos are broken down, but also making sure that you're addressing that there is an AI knowledge gap when it comes to securing AI. And so by knowing that, that's really important to have. And also be aware that there is insufficient security training for data scientists and developers when it comes to securing AI. So you can't fully rely on your data scientists and developers to do that for you and they don't have the time either, and the security folks themselves, they don't know where to turn sometimes, but how do I educate myself? Or making sure that companies also invest in the training of the security professionals to ensure that they're also aware of how to secure AI. There's not a lot of courses out there, there's not a lot of programs out there. So we'll see a lot of that developing this year. I think there'll be a good number of ones that will be released over the next few years because we are playing that catch up game, but they are working on it.
So on the policy and regulation side, so as we bring this to a close, so what are some things on your radar that you think that the general public is still not quite paying attention to?
I think is just to be aware of everything related to AI. I think one of the things that in cybersecurity in general, we should also be aware of AI ethics. So being aware of what we're building and how that can impact society, I think that's really important for us to be aware of. That that's something that we should have more conversations about. I also think that everyone should probably take a look at the bipartisan U.S. House AI Task Force report that came out in December of last year. This was a lot of work and a lot of effort went into it. It is over 273 pages, but granted, it is definitely worth a read to know where we are in the US when it comes to regulating AI and what are the concerns at this time. It's quite a good piece of work that, both sides came together to work on and to put out. If you wanna be aware of everything that's happening globally on the policy front, I really do recommend is checking out the OECD AI. They have a policy hub, so you can learn everything that you need to know about what are the policies that are trying to be pushed out on a global scale for your company to be ahead of. So even if we don't have, federal legislation at this time, I think it's a great resource to know what you should be prepared for in case those things happen, so your company is ahead of the game. And then also there is the World Economic Forum. They did come out with a Presidio AI framework, which is focuses on safety and governance. It's also a really good read that we don't talk about too much, but maybe another thing to look at. And of course, do check out OWASP, AI Exchange, the top 10 LLM. Do be familiar with MITRE Atlas framework, DASP. Oh my God, this is amazing thing. I'm not gonna like it is such a great and relief that this thing exists now. So do check it out. And then also be aware of NIST AI framework. And there's so much that will be added on. So many changes are happening this year in policy and regulation when it comes to AI. So just be aware of things and, keep your eyes on the news and, keep ahead of everything.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the O'Reilly Podcast, Generative AI in the Real World. If you want to listen to the full version, please log in to the platform at O'Reilly.com.